Today on Alex and Autos, we're out here in the forest taking a look at the 2015 Infiniti Q50. Now the Infiniti Q50 is probably the most overlooked entry in this compact luxury sedan segment. There are four basic models for 2015. We have the Q50, the Q50S, the Q50 Hybrid, and the Q50S Hybrid. The model we're taking a look at right here is the Q50S, which means we get the sport front bumper. Our model also has the all-around camera, but Infiniti has actually better hidden the camera. It's no longer part of the Infiniti logo. It's actually above it right here in this chrome section of the front grille. We have well-integrated front parking sensors and LED headlamps. Part of the S trim are these upgraded front and rear brakes. At just over 188 inches long, the Q50 is one of the longer entries in this segment. And as a result, it has one of the highest combined legroom figures in this segment. That's front legroom plus rear legroom. Now we must talk about the Infiniti Q40, because Infiniti essentially replaced the G sedan with the Q50, but they did not remove the G sedan from the lineup. They named that the Q40. That means Infiniti has three sedans sold in America. They have the Q40, the Q50, and the Q70 and Q70L. But this does not translate into BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, and 7 Series corollaries. It's important to keep in mind because although the Q50 is larger than a 3 Series, the Q70 is really the one that more directly competes with the 5 Series. It has a V8 engine under the hood, it also has a hybrid and a V6 model, and that really does line up very well against the 5 Series. It's obvious taking a look at the profile that this is a rear-wheel drive sedan, so we get this large hood up front and a relatively short trunk lid out back. That makes this different than the other value entries in this segment, like the Volvo or the Acura, which are front-wheel drive based models. Out back, all models get dual chrome exhaust tips, and we have very attractive tail lamp modules. They remind me a little bit of the Mazda 6 sedan, or perhaps the Mazda 6 sedan reminds me a little bit of the Infiniti Q50. You'll also find well-integrated parking sensors out back, and you'll notice that some of the extra length in the Q50S is taken up by having a real bumper in the back. So many of the entries in this segment are shorter because their trunk lid and their bumper are very much one on top of the other. They don't really step out for the rear bumper. So keep that in mind when you take a look at some of the extra size that we get in this model versus the competition. Under the hood is where we find the biggest difference between the Q50 and the competition, and the reason that the Q50 is probably the best value in this segment. Things start out with a 3.7-liter V6 engine producing 328 horsepower and 269 pound-feet of torque. That's very different than most of the competition that starts with a 2-liter turbocharged engine producing around 240 or 250 horsepower. The main trade-off for getting more power in the base model of the Q50 is that we get less fuel economy in this base model versus other base models. If you want more power and better fuel economy, there is a hybrid model of the Q50, which is fairly unique in this segment, and that combines a 3.5-liter V6 engine with electric motors to give you 360 total system horsepower and approximately 400 pound-feet of torque. The hybrid option will not only drop the 0 to 60 time below the BMW 335i, but it will also give this class-leading 31 miles per gallon combined. Both engines are mated to a 7-speed automatic transmission, and you can get all-wheel drive on all the models, including that hybrid. When it comes to front seat comfort, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points. We only have a 2-way adjustable lumbar support instead of a 4-way adjustable lumbar support that you'll find in most models in this segment. That means it's going to be a little bit more difficult for certain drivers and certain passengers to find a comfortable seating position. We do have an extending thigh cushion in our particular model and an adjustable bolster for the side of the seat. Our model has the powered tilt telescopic steering column and the 2-position seat memory that also links the steering wheel memory into the system. Now you need to know that the power steering column and that 2-position seat memory are bundled in the same package that gives us the steer-by-wire system. When it comes to rear seat comfort, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points. Although we do get more combined legroom than we get in something like a BMW 3 Series, that's front legroom plus rear legroom, we actually have a somewhat limited headroom figure back here. My head is touching the ceiling if I lean back in this seat. Now, moving over to the right side of the vehicle, I still have a decent amount of room, even though this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, adjusted for a 6'5" passenger. The middle seat is decidedly less comfortable than the outboard seats. We get a very pronounced hump because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and I do have to crane my head awfully to one side in order to sit back here. I would suspect that a 5'2", 5'3" passenger might be able to sit upright in the middle seat, and that's largely because it's a decent amount higher than the outboard seats. If you like a big trunk, you may be a little bit disappointed by the Q50, because even though this is one of the longer entries in this segment, the trunk is a little bit on the small side. Infiniti does soften the blow a little bit with hidden hinges, which do not impact the cargo area at all, but you'll notice that roller bags back here in the cargo area do seem to take up a decent portion of the cargo room. If I take this 24-inch roller bag, I can put it in that position and slide it almost all the way to the seat back, but not quite all the way. This 26-inch roller bag cannot go in the trunk in the same fashion. If you get the hybrid model, then trunk capacity drops even further to just over 9 cubic feet, which is quite small in this segment. Although cargo space is a tiny bit limited, we do still have a temporary spare tire under the cargo load floor, which is something that I really appreciate. We have some additional storage space on either side that's taken up by these foam dividers for the jack, as well as the tire iron on the other side. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, I'm going to have to drop this down to 6 out of 10 points. This trunk is a little bit smaller than I would like, and the opening is a little bit smaller than I had expected based on the overall size. In addition, the hybrid model is definitely my favorite model of the Q50, but the trunk is even smaller. We do have a nice helper handle on the side, and as I said, we do have hidden hinges which don't really impact the cargo area. Front seat passengers get height adjustable seatbelts and two-way adjustable headrests. If we take a look down here at the seats, you'll notice that it is sort of a striped pattern going on right there in the perforated section of leather. This is quite a unique look. Our model has the optional extending thigh cushions, and the driver's seat does have adjustable side bolsters as well. As we've come to expect from Infiniti, certain elements in this interior are highly stylized, but they're not quite as highly stylized as the Lexus IS, for instance. This interior does come off as a little bit more traditional than the Lexus. The door panel is a combination of soft touch injection molded plastics, pleather that is stitched like the armrest right over here in this inset section, as well as real wood trim and imitation metal trim. As with most of the entries in the luxury category, you will find a little bit of hard plastic, but it's pretty much limited to the bottom of the door panel. Our model has the 14-speaker Studio on Wheels sound system, and there are quite a lot of speakers going on up front. You can see that we have a large speaker right down here, a smaller speaker here, a tweeter up in the door, and then speakers on the dash itself. Speaking of the dashboard, the Infiniti has a much more expansive design than the very closed design that we see in the IS350. So this feels a lot less claustrophobic on the inside. Part of that feeling is due to this dashboard being placed quite far away from the front passenger. On the downside, that does result in a relatively small glove compartment. This instruction manual booklet is really all we can fit in there. Dominating the center of the dashboard is this two-screen infotainment system. We have an 8-inch color touchscreen up here, and we have a slightly smaller touchscreen right down here. The theory behind this two-screen infotainment setup is very similar to what Acura is doing in their latest models, where we have navigation on this upper screen, and then we have audio functions down on this lower screen. If you want to know more about this two-screen infotainment system, go ahead and click that link at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on to a dedicated review on this infotainment system. You'll find the dual-zone climate control buttons on either side of that infotainment screen, a single-disc optical player, and buttons for that audio system as well. Below that, you'll find a small storage cubby / ashtray, as well as a 12-volt power outlet right there. We have a very traditional console shifter right below that, so drive us all the way back, over for the manual mode, up for up, and down for down. To the side of that, we have two large cup holders. I was able to fit large takeout drinks right like that inside. However, two takeout drinks of this size don't really work too well next to each other. Behind that, we have a softly padded center armrest that opens to reveal a relatively small storage cubby. You will find larger cubbies, especially in the front-wheel drive models in this segment like the Lincoln, the Acura, and the Volvo. Behind the navigation control, we find the drive mode selector, and this allows us to select between personal, sport, standard, eco, and snow. This controls the way the engine, the transmission, and most importantly, the steering works in the Q50. Now, we don't have an adaptive suspension system like you find in other models, but the steering does change character quite a lot. On the driver's side, we have a fairly traditional 4-dial instrument cluster with a large multifunction display in the middle. The display is controlled via these two buttons on the right side of the steering wheel. It allows us to cycle through a few different displays. Now, there are no menus in that system like you find in other Infiniti products. All the system settings are adjusted via those two screens in the dashboard. Zooming out to the steering wheel, we can again see those two buttons right down here. They're right under the cruise control buttons. Since we do have the radar adaptive cruise control, that's the distance set button. Cruise control enable disable button right there, and this turns off the driving aids that are on our particular model. Now, the reason the camera angle has been changed is because these buttons on this side of the steering wheel handle the audio system that's right over here in the center console. And let's show you how this works. So we have the dedicated voice command button, phone hang up pickup button, volume up down button, but then this button right here actually changes options on that display. So you can see I'm toggling down and it will change through options there. Now, this allows us to change certain audio settings right here via this steering wheel. Positioned right behind the steering wheel are these paddle shifters, and they are some of the best that are available in any vehicle. They are metal and they are attached to the steering column, which is something that a lot of people prefer. Personally, I like mine on the back of the steering wheel, so that way as the steering wheel is rotating like that, I can command a shift. But a lot of people do seem to prefer this more racing car style paddle shifter where they do not move with the steering wheel. Infiniti's direct adaptive steering or steer-by-wire system is a defining feature about the Q50, but it doesn't come on all models. That's something a lot of people are a little bit confused about. So regular models get a more standard steering rack. Now the reason we have direct adaptive steering is because it gives us much more ability to vary the steering gear ratio. Now in a traditional variable steering ratio system, you can vary that a little bit, but you can't get as varied as you can in a system like this, where we really can make quite drastic changes to the steering ratio. In addition to all of this, Infiniti can actually program feedback back into the steering wheel for us. So they do this in order to try and compensate for things like crosswinds or grooved pavement, that sort of thing out on the road. So if you're driving in a crosswind, the steering wheel is pointed straight ahead, the vehicle will try and drive straight ahead. But the car will actually be applying some binary steering input in order to counteract crosswinds that may be acting on the vehicle to try and pull it to one side or the other. The result there can be a very peculiar feeling out on the road because your steering wheel is straight ahead, your hands and arms are straight ahead and not moving at all, but the car can sometimes feel like it's jerking slightly side to side, especially in a strong side wind. Let's go straight to the numbers now. Acceleration comes in at 5 seconds in this 3.7-liter V6 model. That makes this easily the fastest base model in this segment because most of those base models with which this competes all have around 240, 250 horsepower, and this has 327. Now if you get the all-wheel drive model, then 0 to 60 times actually slow down just a hair because traction really isn't that big of a problem in the Q50, especially in the model we're taking a look at right here, which has the staggered rubber in the rear. If you get the hybrid model, then the 0 to 60 time actually drops to 4.8 seconds, which makes this a little bit faster than the BMW 335i. Obviously something like the BMW M3 would be faster, but that's actually a slightly different category than this vehicle. Keeping in mind that we are in the Q50S, which does have the sport brake and sport tire package, does stop very confidently as far as stopping distances go, and the brake fade resistance was very good. Handling is a very tricky thing to talk about in the Q50 because of this direct adaptive steering that our model has. It tends to make the car feel a little bit video game-ish. The reason for that is all these electronic systems that make the Q50 feel a tiny bit artificial at times also help us improve handling. Because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, the chassis balance is excellent, and that really helps improve handling. We also have slightly wider tires in the rear, which again improve handling, and the electronic systems in this vehicle all help play along as well. Right now I have the vehicle set to personal mode, which is giving us the quickest steering ratio, but it's also linked to a system that's helping torque vector us around the corners with the brake system. So the brakes on this car will automatically apply one side or the other to help us turn around that corner as fast and as tight as possible. While that may make the handling feel a tiny bit artificial, it really does help us go around the corners faster than most of the entries in this segment. Now in terms of actual handling feel, I'm going to have to drop this below the Cadillac ATS, below the IS, and below the BMW 3 Series. As far as steering feel goes, I would say this is actually more similar to the Audi A4, the S60, or the Acura TLX, even though the handling ability really is quite different. The hybrid model really gets some quite impressive fuel economy, which actually surprised me. When testing the larger Infiniti, which is the Q70 hybrid model, I actually averaged 31 miles per gallon in that vehicle, slightly better in this Q50. The reason for that is largely because we get a fairly stout electric motor, and that vehicle has a very aggressive hybrid system that will switch to electric-only mode even at highway speeds. The way they do it is we get the engine, then we get a clutch pack, then we get an electric motor, then the 8-speed automatic, then a clutch pack, and then the power goes to the rear wheels. The reason they do that is so that they can actually decouple the engine from the transmission, so that way the electric motor can drive through the transmission and drive us along at highway speeds. That means that in EV mode it is relatively efficient because it still has that 7-speed automatic and those gear ratios to help improve efficiency. Having all those clutches in the system allows the vehicle to decouple the engine and the transmission from the rear differential and then start the engine with that electric motor and then recouple it all later. That helps the transitions between EV and hybrid mode happen a little bit more seamlessly than in some of the competition. Now it's not quite as seamless as the Lexus GS hybrid, however we do get decently more power, better performance in this hybrid, as well as actually better fuel economy as well, as long as you're not driving in the city. In city driving, the Lexus GS will give a slightly better fuel economy, but in highway travel, this is much better. Now remember that the direct corollary to this model is not the GS Hybrid. The GS Hybrid actually competes with the Q70 Hybrid. For reasons that Lexus has never explained, the IS300 Hybrid, or IS300H, is not sold in the United States, and that really would be the model that would compete directly with the Q50. We scored 71 decibels in this cabin, which does make it a little bit louder than some of the competition. That may have to do with the run-flat tires that are on this model as well as the large tires we have in the rear. Generally, handling and ride are at opposite ends of the teeter-totter, and that's definitely true in this model. Because we get relatively low-profile tires, again, run-flat tires, and a relatively stiff suspension in this Q50S model, even though Infiniti has really reworked what was going on in the Infiniti G sedan, they've kept an awful lot of the fun. These paddle shifters are absolutely excellent, but this engine, more importantly, has an excellent throttle blipping program, which really makes it sound great. And this engine revs up to 7,500 RPM, and it will actually hang out there, so it has a true manual mode. When I actually command it into manual mode, you can just floor it, hang right out there all day long. I know I've been talking a lot about value, but it's important that when we're talking about pricing, you don't confuse value with low starting prices, because the Q50 does start a little bit higher than some of the base models from the competition. But that's because this doesn't really compete directly with the base models. This is giving you better value for a slightly higher price. $37,150 is where the Q50 starts for the 2015 model year. If you want to add all-wheel drive, that will be $38,950. But this does not compete really that directly with the Lexus IS250 or the BMW 320i. This really competes more with the IS350 and the BMW 335i in all forms. If you want the S model that we've been testing here with the sport brakes, sport seats, sport suspension, and the paddle shifters, that will set you back $43,650. You can add all-wheel drive to the S model as well for $45,450. If you don't like the sound of the steer-by-wire system, also known as Infiniti's direct adaptive steering, fear not, you can avoid it because it's really only part of one package on the Q50. Now, unfortunately, that one package is also bundled together with the power tilt telescopic steering column, the memory seats for the driver, the all-around camera system, the maple trim, and the rain sense wipers. Infiniti tells us that at some point they do plan on separating that out so you can get those features without the direct adaptive steering, but we don't know exactly when that will happen. Now let's talk about competition. The Q50 starts about $300 less than a BMW 328i. That's significantly less than a 335i. Thanks to the turbocharger in the 335i and the 8-speed automatic, it will actually be slightly faster than the Q50 in standard form. But the Q50 hybrid is a hair faster than the 335i. In addition to being faster than the 335i, the hybrid model is also significantly more efficient. And interestingly enough, it's still a very, very good deal because it's only $650 more than a base 335i. The major downside to the Q50 hybrid is that we trade all that power for a significantly smaller trunk. It's only about 9 cubic feet or so back here in the trunk with the hybrid battery pack. That's about the same size as you get in your average convertible. Because Mercedes has really left the competition for the 328i and the IS250 to the Mercedes-Benz CLA, this is significantly less expensive than the cheapest Mercedes-Benz C-Class in the United States. This is also about $3,000 less than an IS350. Although Lexus's IS250 is a very nice base model, it has a very, very smooth V6, this model gives you significantly more power. It's almost 130 horsepower more than that IS250 in base form. Expanding the competition pool outward a little bit, the Volvo S60 is a good deal, but we don't get the same kind of power for the same price as we get in this model, and there's no hybrid model at this time. The other thing you should know about the S60 is that it is a front-wheel drive biased vehicle, so although I do prefer the way the steering feels in that model a little bit more than the direct adaptive steering we get in this car, it's not going to handle nearly as well as a rear-wheel drive vehicle like this. The S60 is also definitely small in the back seat. Acura's TLX is a good value, but it's also quite different than most of the entries in this segment because it is a front-wheel drive based vehicle and we have an interior that is a little bit larger than everybody else's in this segment, including the Q50. That's made possible because it is a front-wheel drive based vehicle. Although comparisons between the Q50 and the TLX seemed pretty rampant on my Facebook page over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, I don't really see them as very direct competitors because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle with very solid rear-wheel drive sporting dynamics, and the TLX is a front-wheel drive vehicle that handles incredibly well, but it's still front-wheel drive and its mission is still to give you maximum interior space and a definite value proposition. The handling, the performance, and the handling feel are vastly different between the two. The Q50 also has a more premium looking and more premium feeling cabin in my opinion, with real wood trim on the inside that you don't get over there in the Acura. Audi's A4 has long been sort of a mainline value option because it is German, it has a recognizable luxury brand name, but because of the design of the A4, it either comes in front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive formats. And the thing you need to know is that all of the versions of the A4, the engine is entirely in front of the front axle because of the way Audi Quattro is designed. That means that a comparable Q50 will definitely outhandle and outfeel an A4. The A4 actually feels more like the Acura TLX and Volvo S60, especially in corners, than the Q50, the Lexus, or the BMW 3 Series. Audi's base 2-liter engine is definitely less powerful than this 3.7-liter V6, and if you opt to bump up to that 3-liter supercharged engine in the Audi, the hybrid model will still be less expensive and more powerful. Cadillac's ATS, especially in 2.0 turbocharged trim, is the best handling and best feeling entry in this segment. Rather unfortunately, it's significantly smaller on the inside than this. The fuel economy in the Cadillac ATS really isn't that much different than this 3.7-liter V6 engine in the Q50, and if you get the Q50 hybrid, it is significantly better than any version of the ATS, and we get more power definitely than even the ATS 3.6. Performance-wise, this 3.7 and the ATS 3.6 are very, very close with one another. I actually found this went 0 to 60 a hair faster than the ATS 3.6, and the hybrid model is that next level better. My bottom line with the Q50 is that this is definitely one of my favorite entries in this segment, and I would probably buy it before I bought any of the other entries. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the Infiniti is best at everything, but I think the value proposition and the performance that you get are absolutely excellent. I would definitely buy the Infiniti Q50 hybrid unless I needed the extra trunk space. The Q50 hybrid is one of the few hybrids out there that not only gives you better performance, but also notably better fuel economy in the real world, and may eventually pay for itself. The exact same hybrid drivetrain in the Infiniti Q70 hybrid averaged me approximately 31 miles per gallon in my daily driving cycle that I've been getting around 19 miles per gallon in this car. So that's a definite 50% fuel economy improvement. Although the trunk is a little bit smaller than most of the competition, the back seat is definitely larger than most of the competition in this segment, except if you're taking a look at those larger front-wheel drive options. My last comment might shock you just a little bit, because I would not only get the hybrid, but I would also get the hybrid with the steer-by-wire system. And that's only because that is packaged with all the other options that I like. If it was an option to buy that package without the steer-by-wire system, then I would do it. However, because it's not available, I would live with it and get all those other options anyway. Because although I didn't quite care for the steer-by-wire system, I think that I would get used to it, and I do value all those other options a little bit more than my general dislike for the steer-by-wire system. My only major complaint about the steer-by-wire system isn't the feel itself, it's actually that we don't get any additional features out of it. So we don't get any active parking assistance system, we don't get any autonomous driving system integrated with that steer-by-wire system. And I think if we had features like that, then I might be more willing to pay for the steer-by-wire system. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Infiniti Q50S. Go ahead and click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen and be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, over at Twitter as AlexandAutos, and email all of your questions to alex@alexandautos.com. I'll see you next week.